Welcome to the Branford Forum, everyone. I'm Dan Raven.
Gotcha.
I'm thrilled that you all came today. I would like to thank Alice Pence, the head librarian here, and her staff. They've been very supportive in letting us use this space, and I know some of you enjoyed all the pictures beforehand, so it's a great thing for us. Today, it's a pleasure to have Marian Chertow, PhD, here. She's a professor of industrial environmental management at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, and she's director of the Yale Center for Industrial Ecology. She recently received the Society Prize of the International Society for Industrial Ecology, which is quite a high honor. Now, she has affiliations both in the School of Forestry and in the School of Management. And I think that there's something kind of fundamental, interesting going on there, that we're frequently presented with a duality of either you support the environment or you support jobs and the economy. And I think she's going to give us an indication that it's not either or, that there are ways to integrate all of our concerns and to approach manufacturing and waste in quite a different way. So, her talk today is called Industrial Ecology, a Win-Win Strategy. So thank you.
Were you using a microphone?
Okay.
So I don't know, do I need a microphone? All right, so I'm alarmingly casual for a professor, so forgive me for that. But it's a Sunday and we should all relax and maybe learn something new. And I'd just like to thank my husband, Matthew Emerson, for coming along, because that's nice. It's very nice. Yeah, that's great. That's a perfect reason why. Yeah. I just, is anyone in this room, do they know the old MIF plant in Branford?
Yes.
Please raise your hand if you know the old MIF plant. Okay. My first job out of college, I went to Barnard College, and my first job was at the old MIF plant in Branford. I never heard of Connecticut, let alone Branford, but there it was. So I have very warm memories of my time there way back when there was a recycling factory there. We now call MRFs, Material Recovery Facilities, and it was like the first one. I mean, there's an argument on whether the first one or the second one, you know how that goes. But I was very proud to work there, and to this day, if you look in Wikipedia, there it is, you know, for being such an important pioneer in the recycling business. So it's very nice. You know, my field has a funny name. You heard it's called industrial ecology. And just to make you more comfortable, I want to tell you that at Yale, there are actually quite a number of oxymorons in use when it comes to our academic programs. So, you see, in history, we learn about the Civil War. And at the law school, they're always talking about resident aliens. And don't forget about standard deviations in math, right? Chemistry, now this took me a while to get it. Synthetic, natural gas. And let us remember all the people who have this problem. They're full of an oxymoron. And of course, in my field, this is very important. We talk about sanitary landfill. So why not have industrial ecology, I say? Is there any better reason than that? It makes you think a little bit. So the first thing I want to share with you, and this is so important, that industrial ecology is all about physical resources. It's all about materials and energy and water, you know, things like that. Now, we don't only just worry about them, but we think about them as the primary difference for industrial ecology. And you see that it's quite an issue for this gentleman. He's quite concerned about the material flow that's about to land on him. And we can all picture why that is so. I wanted to give you a little bit more of an introduction because Yale is a big leader in the world of industrial ecology. And so since it's somewhat novel, perhaps, let me say that it started in the early 1990s. There was a very stimulating article, I'll quote, from 1989 by the research directors at General Motors. So there is an industry base. But it really is an interdisciplinary field, and that's, people talk about it, but it's hard to get that. And so you see it mixes environmental science and engineering, business and policy all together with block to reduce environmental problems. And I mentioned the second bullet, this intensive focus, materials, energy, water, we consider water a material, and through systems at different scales. So we might just look at a factory, but we might just look at a city, and we might just look at a region or a globe, you know? And so by taking measurements at all these levels, we can start to put the pieces together. The third bullet talks about not just being about the resources themselves, but we have to understand them in their context, and this is what makes us interdisciplinary, right? That there are lots of influences, economic, political, regulatory, social factors. I mean, resources in many ways are politics. You know, who gets the rare earth metals and who gets the oil? So when you think of it in that way, you can't, it's not enough just to think about the physical materials, but you have to think about what happens to them. And there are a number of universities, I mean, Yale's one of them, but there are a number of universities that are very active with industrial ecology. Our programs typically started in the 90s, late 90s. And NTNU is the Norwegian Technical University. They're a big competitor of ours. Tsinghua University in China is considered, you know, one of the top 2 universities there, and they have quite an extensive program that we've been involved with from the beginning. And Leiden in the Netherlands is probably the biggest program right now. They have just lots and lots of professors cranking out articles and, with any luck, shedding light on important problems that have to do with materials and energy and waste and so forth. So that's some background. Why is it so important to follow the materials? Well, I was invited to the G7. Our US EPA asked me to be the scientist who got to go there, so I got to go there. The G7 was creating a group on resource efficiency. You know, how can we use less energy and improve our use of all these materials and water and so forth. So I was very careful. I was really nervous. You know, I wanted to get all my footnotes lined up and make sure that I could justify everything I said at the G7. And so these were my global numbers. That it's so important to track these things because we lose at least 33% of our energy globally. We lose a lot more in the US, by the way, but we lose 33% globally. And so this is 2020. You know, we shouldn't be doing that anymore. Food, the numbers are very consistent here, 30 to 50% of all food, and here's the key word, it's produced, right? It's already produced, and then it's wasted. The US number is 40%. And then for water, water's hard to measure. I didn't want to get in trouble, you know, so I thought I'd go with leaky pipes. And these cities around the world, Mexico City, I mean, they lose up to 60% of their water just because of leaky pipes. Now, you cannot replace them. You can't invent new water, right? So it's crucial that we do these old things, the maintenance things, but we all like to move on to new things, and sometimes the problem is more obvious. So for these reasons, you can see it's still important to study these things. These are the actual names of parts of industrial ecology. I'm not going to do them all today because it would take too long, and you wouldn't get bored, of course. But so the ones in blue, the material and energy studies, Lifecycle Assessment. How many people have ever heard about Lifecycle Assessment? Okay, good. And resource efficiency, I have to mention. Industrial symbiosis is my special field. It's what I do, and so we'll talk about that, of course, and we'll leave some of the other ones behind, but they're all part of the package. So I want to start with the materials and the material flows and make the point that this, not only in the sort of mega way I just said with world water and world energy, but even at the level of making one Pratt & Whitney engine, there's a lot that goes into it, you know, 1 million pounds of ore to get a 10,000 pound engine, right? So no one's doing anything wrong per se. It's, you know, that you got to take the minerals from the rock, and the rock is heavy, but it's only partly the iron ore, and then the processing step, the forging step, same, but that's how it is. And of course, Pratt & Whitney doesn't like it any more than we do. They would love to have a so-called more efficient operation, but one of their business metrics is the buy to fly ratio. So you want to buy closer to that lower number of 10,000 than to the whole million, but you can't have it that way. And it's a reminder that some waste is hidden. You know, you don't even think about the waste that's beside the mine, the iron mine, right? You just think about everything. So when you put it all together, it's something everyone would like to do differently, but it's sort of a fact of nature for now. So this is an interesting series. You know, when you think about your cell phone or something, how many elements of the periodic table does it take to make a cell phone? How many people have fear of the periodic table from their days in high school? Okay, thanks for being honest. We brought a counselor here. Well, I won't ask you any questions about it, but I'll just show you that in the 1980s, and this is actually an article done at our engineering department, there's this many elements in advanced electronics, and by the 1990s there was this many, and by the 2000s there was this many, and in the 2010s we have even more. So it isn't just that, you know, we've lost some energy and some water and leaky pipes and everything, but we're using almost everything in the world to make our, in this case, electronics, whether it's healthcare devices or telecommunications devices, whatever they are. They need these advanced minerals because you want them. You're the consumer, right? You want that red light on your phone to go on and off with the phosphorus. And if we just went through the whole cell phone, you'd see these are things you want. You don't want those. Remember the big ones from the 80s? You know, they were like when they had the big antenna. We're getting a lot more service from our phones now. You know, the camera and everything that we rely on. In a soft sense, it's the communication with our children, right? It's everything all at once. But it takes a lot of materials. So with this emphasis on materials, now you can see why I'm going to talk a lot more about them. This is kind of a funny one for me. The first great experiment in industrial ecology. And this is a doctor, you see Dr. Sanctorius from the 1500s. And he kind of noticed that, you know, sometimes he felt heavier and sometimes he felt lighter. And what was this all about? So he put together this machine at his table. Can you see the chicken leg on his table? And it's actually a scale, a balance, right? And so he would sit in the balance before the meal, during the meal, after the meal. And he noticed that, you know, as you can see on the third bullet, after an hour, his weight, after he ate, an hour later, he'd get a little lighter when he'd weigh himself. And so this is such an important breakthrough because it means we're starting to understand human metabolism, right? What goes in, what goes out, what gets stored inside, you know, usually about right here on me, and you know, what is waste. I mean, all of these things are part of our understanding of human metabolism. Well, industrial ecologists have seriously appropriated the word metabolism. We use it for everything, and I'll prove that to you now. What is the metabolism of an industrial plant? So this is a power plant in China. Well, just like our human body, we take stuff in, right? The high sulfur coal, 5 to 6 million tons per year. And something goes out, the electricity, right? 15 billion kilowatt hours per year of electricity. And some comes out as waste, but is actually potentially valuable. So carbon dioxide, you see the quantities, SOx and NOx, fly ash and bottom ash, waste oil, waste solvents. And so the question I always ask as an industrial ecologist is, well, can we do something with these so they're not just waste? And that has a lot to do with the name industrial ecology, because we're kind of looking at industries the same way we look at organisms here, whether they're biological organisms. So that's an example of how we've stolen the word metabolism. Here's another one, Toyota. I found this on the internet. I mean, they didn't even ask me to do the study. They just did it all by themselves because they need materials to make cars, right? So you see all the inputs here, and it's quite detailed. You see what goes into production. You see what comes out, these lovely cars. They count even the emissions, and, so the gaseous outputs, and the volume of wrapping and packaging materials. So they're doing a thorough job of understanding everything that goes in and out of that plant, because they need to make sure they have more, or they need to figure out how to use less. So any way you cut it, this is a great example of industrial ecology and how it would apply to a whole corporation like this, instead of just the one facility like that power plant I showed you in China. Well, we also talk about urban metabolism, and that's a thing. We have we have hundreds of papers on urban metabolism. What goes into a city? What comes out of a city? Right? How is it like a human body? And what goes in, raw materials and fuel and water, but somehow, Toronto gets built, right? And the products that go out, some are helpful, the goods that we make, the built environment, the goods that we make, but then we also have waste, and we also have, the other types of emissions and so forth. So my colleague Chris Kennedy is an expert in this area. And I really love his definition, the sum of the tech. Can you see this in the back? Okay, so you can read it. We're looking at these are metabolism words resulting in growth, production of energy, and elimination of waste, right? So we're figuring out the metabolism of a city. Turns out to be a pretty important enterprise because, does the city have enough water? Does it have enough phosphorus? Is it reusing what it can? And all those questions. Now we can make these studies, and that's been very helpful to the World Bank and places where they're always trying to look for improvements. Why does one city have so many more greenhouse gases than another city? Can we make a typology of those cities so that we can cluster the cities that are similar, alike, the ones that are high altitude or the ones that are in deserts, all those climatic conditions make an impact. Dan?
Are there characteristics that you can quantitate of a healthy city or a city that is not so healthy? I mean, is there?
Yeah, the newest study I've seen on that is actually of African cities. And I think it's brilliant because they look different than European cities. And there again, you have a much more reliable estimate of what you need and what you don't have. And now we have, because we've been doing this for a couple decades, we can also look at them over time. And one of the first things you notice is that the food is completely different than it was 20 years ago. What people want to eat, where they're getting it from, the distances that are traveled, that's very much changing, and it's typically increasing, right? But in some cities, like in this study, they found that they weren't using as much water as they used to. Well, they probably deindustrialized. New Haven, the water supply in New Haven is more than we need because we don't have all those factories anymore, right? So tracking that over time, again, has both financial, economic, and environmental impacts. Yeah. And that's a snowy day. One of the other things that that we like to do, and that I like to do especially, is look at islands, you know, for the same reasons that Darwin looked at islands, right? They're kind of in isolation. We follow materials, and so this way at least we know where the boundaries are, whereas if you're, you know, if you're in Hartford, there's lots of ways to get to Hartford and lots of ways to get out of Hartford, and my husband Matthew and I were just in Hawaii, and you know, there's one main airport on each of the islands, and there's one main port in Honolulu, and all the stuff that comes into Honolulu is then distributed to the islands. So you don't even get direct shipping, you know, if you're going to be on Maui or in Kauai and so forth. So we find that studying islands has been really valuable. Interestingly, we're always looking at the same model: inputs, outputs, and what stays behind, right? What stays on the island. So if somebody needs a new refrigerator, no refrigerators made on the Big Island, right? But when it gets to the Big Island, then it is part of your stock. And then when you get rid of that refrigerator, and it goes off island somewhere, and then that becomes part of your outputs. So we just finished a paper where we compared 6 different Hawaiian islands because we thought, gee, you know, there's a common government, they're all part of the state of Hawaii, and we can really learn from, we can control some of those variables and really learn, you know, especially about the agriculture on each island, and when we compare them, we're arguing that we can be more useful. Whether anyone will agree with us is yet to be seen. But you see the many applications and appropriations of our use of the term metabolism. So here's just one single example, and this is important. This is kind of foundational to industrial ecology. You know, it turns out that this is also a Canadian example where this bulldozer has been brought in because there was some subsidence on this one house, and so it has to be taken down, and it's done in the old-fashioned way. You know, you just bulldozer it and stick it into the big bin, you know, the big roll-off carrier, and take it to the landfill, and that's the way we do things, right? But the important thing is there's a lot more to what we're putting into that waste bin and taking to the landfill than we think. It's not great anyway. These days, I'm sure you've all seen it, especially in New England, where things are old and you want to preserve them. There's other ways to take down a building. You know, you can try to preserve the wood, you can try to preserve the doors and the windows, but anyway, that wasn't done here. But let's just talk about this house, and let's just talk about that window. So here it is, the house, and the window, what's being taken out is both a window frame and a window pane, right? So go think back to that 10,000-pound jet engine at Pratt & Whitney, right? Just to make that one window frame, what does it weigh, like, you know, 8 pounds? I don't know, what does a window frame weigh? 8 pounds, thank you. It's always good to agree with the professor. So that, to make that 8-pound, I'll have to put it in kilometers, what do you think?
Kilos?
Kilograms.
Oh, 3.8.
Okay, 3.8. We'll use 4. Well, in order to make that one window frame, we need 54 kilograms of minerals, 5 kilograms of chemicals, 70 kilograms of water, and 38 kilograms of fuel, right? So it takes about 150 kilograms to make, what is it, 3.8? 5 kilogram window frame, and you see the same thing on the pane. The numbers are a little different, but it's the same principle. So we call that embedded energy in materials. And so you don't just throw away the frame, but you throw away all 54. You're throwing away this enlarged number of materials. And that's the problem. The landfills, honestly, and my first love is garbage, as my husband knows. The landfills aren't that bad. You know, we do them well now. We have sanitary landfills, the oxymoron. But it's the real issue is that there's all this stuff that is upstream that comes in to make those products that is also being discarded. So this is a real important focus for us. Food also has this large amount of, we call it embedded resources, the water and energy. Look at this. This is one piece of cheese, right? 500 grams. Why am I using grams today? Silly me. What you see is that just to make this, 1.1 pound of cheese, you're using 2,500 liters of water. Now, how is that even possible? What are we looking at? The cow. The cow. That's very important, though, because that's the intuition that you need to have, and you already got it, which is that we're not just looking at the cheese factory, right? But we're going all the way back in time to the cow. And the cow needs shelter, and the cow needs grass, and the cow needs better than grass when they're getting finished, and there are workers that need to work with the cow, and the cows actually do excrete a fair bit, which isn't great for the global environment, as you know. So when we go all the way back through the whole system, and that's the other thing that industrial ecology is, it's all about systems, right? The whole system, not just looking at the dairy, but including the dairy, but looking at everything else on the chain. And when you do that, that's when you find these great big numbers, even in food. So don't eat any more food, okay? So this idea of thinking in systems, this is where a key principle, another key principle, but this is where we're really talking about. We can talk about a tool now called Lifecycle Assessment, and that's the one I just mentioned. And what it does is name all the different stages. It doesn't have a picture of a cow on this one, but we could do that. And so in order for Pratt & Whitney to build that engine, there's extraction and processing of metals, there's manufacturing, there's distributing the parts to the people who need them or components, and then there's the use phase. This is the people who are flying in the plane, or flying the plane perhaps. Once that plane has lived out its life, or let's use a toaster, it's a little more familiar, you throw it away somehow, and maybe it gets collected for recycling. Maybe you take it to get repaired. Heavens, when's the last time you got something repaired? The collection process, like if you put out your recyclables on Tuesdays, they go somewhere to be processed, but even still there's some disposal, right? So this is a map that we follow very closely because you can start to compare things. You can say, this is the most famous example, paper versus plastic bags, right? You can evaluate them all the way across the chain and figure out in a scientific modeling way, what do they have inside them, what are the health impacts and the environmental impacts of that. And when you add that all up, it's hard to compare things and to add them up appropriately. But when you follow the rules and you do that, which is really better for the planet, And we've done this in my group with McDonald's wrappers, can they do something better than what they're doing now? We have something starting up next month on not a specific product like the wrappers, although we also looked at one on the different ways you can dry your hands. Hand dryers, do you use a paper towel? Is the paper recycled paper brown, or is it virgin paper white? Can you use, what else was in the, electric ones, competing electric ones. So it's very, very interesting to have a scientific way to evaluate that particular question. So that's a good point of industrial ecology. So on this life cycle thing, there are lots of organizations, the UN and private companies and NGOs that are involved in it. And so this is a more formal definition to evaluate the environmental burdens associated not just with a product, but a process or an activity throughout its entire existence, right? The one I was about to mention is that other than a product, one of the things I'm eager for my students to look at this semester is comparing single-stream recycling, where you throw everything into one bin, with multi-stream recycling, where you do separations in the home, and to try to figure out on a life cycle basis which is actually better and in which areas. So I think you can see that life cycle assessment can go up and up and look at systems as well as individual products like the hand dryers, right? So a very useful thing. This time I'm using an example from Rolls-Royce. Where are the greenhouse gas emissions? Where's the carbon dioxide emissions in making a Rolls-Royce engine? I don't know why I've got my engines on the brain today. Well, there's a fair bit of releases of carbon dioxide when in the manufacturing stage, because now we're always looking at the life cycle stages. There's not much in the testing phase, but oh, the use phase. Now, who's using that? We are. So we're the culprits, right? Same thing with your automobile, same thing with your scooter, so forth. It's the use
I don't
phase.
have a Rolls Royce.
Oh, well then you're off the hook. So it's important to remember this, and there's a lot of other implications of the use phase, but part of it is, if you were going to spend, if you're Rolls Royce and you're going to spend $100 million trying to improve your efficiency, don't go to the testing phase if you're looking at greenhouse gases. Even the manufacturing stage is a lot lower than it used to be. But do think about this, that's where the impact's going to be, right? Because so much of the emissions from that whole engine is going to be from the use phase. So it's very important, again, to think in these, each segment, each stage, so that we can figure out where the worst problems are and the biggest environmental impacts.
Is that a log scale?
Is it a log scale? This one doesn't look like one, but often there would be. Yeah. All right, so I met Dan, and he was over at Yale, and I showed this slide, and I knew he liked it, so Dan's for you.
It's the colors.
Yeah, the colors.
I wanted to give you an example of a different system, a system that we're all very familiar with, like putting out our waste, right? And I got very excited because I heard about this Swedish company. It's called Optical. And they have a different system. Now again, I'm not just talking about one stage, but I'm talking about the whole system. And in their system, unlike what we do, they have in their kitchen these colored bags. And it's not that hard. The yellow bags have food waste, the green bags have cardboard, the blue bags have glass, whatever the city needs. And you can do that and put them out in this nice colorful container. And then for the next stage, which is going to the material recovery facility, see all the colored bags, well, they have optical sorters so they can tell the color. And that way, the green bags can go where they need to go, and the blue bags can go where they need to go on conveyor belts. And this is kind of a perspective. And you could even have these plants right on site so that the grass clippings could go right into the anaerobic digestion composting plant, and it would be so much more efficient and create so many more jobs. To your point, right? We got a $2.5 million grant a few months ago to look at these sorting facilities, where people try to sort out the different types of plastics and lots of the companies are trying to buy robots now to do that work. So in our grant, they said, okay, you can study robots for sorting, but you can't just, we don't give you money from the national government to fire people. So also please think about those jobs. And the best idea that I've had, because this is my part of the study, is to try to do something like this where we can actually get these jobs on site, not to have to transport them this far to all these different plants. And that would mean that we have not as much transportation, but also more jobs on site that would bring in more material. If it doesn't bring in more material, it sort of doesn't matter because you could still do it far away. But we're just starting to think about how to find jobs that are not as dangerous as the jobs where you might get a hypodermic needle, or you might get glass cut in your hands and so forth. There's a lot of occupational injuries. And try to figure out a different system. So I just invited these people to Yale. I hope they come and will talk to us about these types of issues. Anyhow, this is an applied use of the system thinking, right, to try to figure out how to do the whole thing better. And there's lots of efficiencies I haven't even mentioned, even though I love garbage now. This is quite an efficient step where you can put these bags into any truck. So New England doesn't have to worry about it if they have, this truck or that truck, but it doesn't matter because they're all in these bags and so forth. So lots of advantages. All right, so I mentioned early on, I'll call you just 1 second, the closing the loop we should do that at many different stages, and so we talked about we can do it at the product level, we can do it at a city level, we can do it at all different levels, and I wanted to get to some bigger levels, but not before your questions.
Oh, I was just wondering, those are all plastic bags, those colored bags?
The colored bags, great question. You're not the first person to ask that question, but it's a good question. They're doing incredible number of experiments on different materials for the bags. Because there's a lot of effort now in trying to get biodegradable plastics, and people like me are very skeptical there that they really can be biodegradable. These are plastic bags, as you observe, but they also have a plan for them. They collect them in this system. So,
And reuse them.
and I think they recycle them, which is known as downcycling, where they're not as valuable as they were when they were a nice big red bag, but nonetheless, yeah.
In Brussels, like 10 years ago, they would charge a certain amount for different color bags. Was that part of this as well? That way you stuffed as much as you could in before you put it out, and...
Yeah. So it's great because just by saying what you said, that there's positives and negatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people overstuff their bags and put in things that don't belong, but yes, by and large, charging for bags is helpful in waste reduction. And there's tons of studies of that. I can stand firm on that, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking the one weak spot would be what works in Sweden doesn't work in New York. Is it relies on the individual to sort?
Yeah. So, it's true because Swedish people are really a different species.
They're not usually.
Will Americans sort? Maybe you could only have 3 sorts or something, elementary school
We used to
yes.
sort.
Yeah, we used to sort? Yeah. 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 And so there's a lot open there about how many you would want and where you can send them. But it seems to me that we all know we have to do something to save the earth, and this is like the least thing that we can do, right? I feel pretty strongly about this because, again, at the meeting that I met Dan, I was talking all about sorting and sorting systems, right? And it's the most important problem because if you don't, you can bring it all in one bin to a facility, but then you lose a lot on the back end. So, there's really less gain. There's more transportation, more greenhouse gases, and less waste process. So,
For those of us who don't know much, could you say a little bit about everything in one,
yeah.
whatever you call it, single sort?
Single
How
stream.
does that work?
Yeah.
It
A little
doesn't.
bit.
So single streams means you need more workers getting more injuries,
Okay.
and
So they go to a big factory and then they tear it apart.
yeah. And there's a lot of technologies about bag rippers. There's a lot of technologies right now between the optical sorting and the robots. There's a little competition there, so that's part of the grant that we're looking at. Yeah, there's a lot of pluses and minuses, but now I would argue we have the tools because of industrial ecology and to measure these things much more accurately than we could have before.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. The new theme is other types of products that we can look at through this industrial ecology lens of closing the loops, right? So, okay, so how many people here, not women, how many people here have heard of Eileen Fisher? Okay, let's see. There's some enlightened men in the group, I want to say. So Eileen Fisher, very nice women's clothing, right? It lasts a long time. It always looks good. And it's a very interesting company. Probably 15 years ago, one of my students became their environmental director, so I feel like inside knew Eileen Fisher. And they decided that they wanted to reuse clothing as much as possible and not just throw it away. It's really bad how much clothing gets thrown away. I'll show you a chart on that in a little bit. So in this case, they want to create what the new term is the circular economy. How many people have heard of circular economy? 2 people, okay. So the idea is you don't just make it and throw it away after you use it, but you're cycling the way an industrial ecologist would suggest that you cycle. And circular economy is very popular, the term in Europe. The Chinese had a law on it before the Europeans on the circular economy. So it's another way of talking about this part of industrial ecology where we're talking about cycling materials. All right, so let's be a garment from Eileen Fisher, shall we? So first of all, it's made of natural fibers that's lasts a long time, and so it stays in your closet longer. That's part of this whole cycle, right? Is you have to throw it away after a month or after you wear it once? And how many people have kept Eileen Fisher for more than 10 years? Okay, see, there's a bunch of us, yeah. So it's that quality, and it also comes in these neutral colors, gentlemen. I mean, this is a good thing to know about. Because, then you can wear it with everything. If it's a nice white shirt or blue, blouse, you can wear it long. They have a program where if you break the zipper or there's some other tear, you can send it back, and they'll fix it and mail it back to you. So that's nice. They created the Green Eileen stores so that you could go in and buy used Eileen Fisher products. Now they're really expensive, so it's great when they're half price, or whatever. And you can bring back the ones that you don't want anymore, and you can get new ones. And then there's the interesting question of, well, what else can you do? And what many clothing companies, especially H&M, this is again another huge company, they're all trying to investigate, can you actually, once the thing is finally worn out, right, okay, going in on separate pieces, a lot of companies involved, can you actually de-thread the garment and reuse the thread? And that's really interesting and really high-tech, because everything we wear, let's face it, is a blend of plastic, of polyester, or whatever, and cotton. I mean, I'm using specifics, but natural materials and what do we call those?
Synthetics.
Synthetics, there we go. Synthetic material. And so you need to melt the clothes. I mean, it's hard, but it's like under the radar right now, but there's lots of companies doing it, and we're following this very closely. Yeah. Anyhow, so Eileen Fisher. So look at what their numbers are. Since 2009, they've taken back 800,000 pieces of clothing. And they run me through kind of what I told you, the gently worn clothes that you can renew, the over-dyed. So let's say you got a little coffee stain, they can kind of make it look like it's part of the fabric, when you give it to them. They can re-sew. And then this is the issue about regenerated fibers that I just talked about. So very interesting, great company. And now they have a whole online store. Does anyone besides me get the emails like every week from Eileen Renew?
I'll look for it.
Yeah. So take out your phone. Come on, be like the kids. And there it is. It's all on the internet. You see photographs of actual clothing. You can buy them online. Who knew that Eileen Fisher would be so good at that? Well, the truth is, Eileen Fisher is doing that. As I said, it's available. The bargains are great. But how would they know how to do all that warehousing and all that repair? And why would they want to do that when they're really worrying about their brand and lots of other environmental and human issues? So here's the truth. The truth is that there's now a number of, but I'm just going to talk about one called Yale e-commerce, and they're what's called a white label company. Anyone ever heard of white label? No? Okay, so do you know about it?
Yeah, kind of a generic store brand thing, you can like work for any store.
So they'll do anything that anybody wants them to do, but not use their own name. This one is called Yale e-commerce. And rather than have Eileen Fisher and Patagonia works with them too, and REI works with them too, do all that work and take all those photos and all the things that are not part of their core business, they hired Yale. This is Yale e-commerce's warehouse. And I did talk to the president of this company. I tried to get him to come to Yale, but it's in California and he didn't. But he said, this is a really fast-growing space, like 25% per year, bigger, faster than online and everything. Is this idea of e-commerce and being able to buy the second-hand or third-hand products. So very interesting trend now. And people always say Americans, and it was alluded to already, don't seem like the ones who want to sort a lot or anything else, but we do like business. And I think, this idea of online businesses and everything could be very useful for us. Here's just another totally different kind of company, which I'm showing you because, once again, it was a topic in my lab groups. This is a mobile app on your phone, and if you want to, let's say you have a whole lasagna and you ate half and the kids are away and they're gone, and you want somebody else to take the other half, you just put it online. The company's called Olio, and someone will appear and take, and get the lasagna. This is called the Tinder for food. You can meet on the dates here. And this is, you know that food waste is a serious problem. The numbers are all up there, 1.3 billion tons per year, and how much in the US and how much in the EU. So this is their mission, redistributing edible yet unwanted food to secondary consumers. And it says could yield these benefits, so they asked one of my doctoral students actually to run the studies on whether they're actually good environmental and social benefits. And it was fascinating. I have to tell you, we asked every question. This is how it looks, on your app. So you get the geography, and we did every possible study. Let's see, this is in England. It's a British company, but you can find it right now on your phone. Is there more taking or is there more accepting? Are there clusters or not? Bakeries have gotten involved, so they play a big role in it. The big circles in our network analysis are the bakeries and groceries that have things at the end of the day to get rid of. And so it's complicated, but it's also very interesting. And is it more of a charity or is it more of a shared economy? All these distinctions are what we've been working on for the last year and a half or so. So again, interesting sort of circular economy, right? You're reusing food. So there you have. Okay. So and now I want to get to the largest scale. And this is, as I mentioned, where I do my own work. And this is the first article that I mentioned I was going to show you by Robert Frosch and Nicholas Glopoulos, called Strategies for Manufacturing, published in Scientific American in 1989. And Bob Frosch, at that time, was the head of R&D for General Motors. So big job, right? He's also the head of NASA, and he's also a professor at, what's that school in Cambridge? He says, let's conceive not of the way we usually do business, but of an industrial ecosystem where the effluents from one process serve as the raw material for another. So that you don't even make the waste, you just pass it on to somebody else, the materials, right? And so this has fascinated me for way too long. In the same year that they wrote that article, 1989, some reporters in Denmark found this cluster. And this is an bunch of industrial companies in the city of Kalundborg, Denmark. Kalundborg has about 50,000 people. And what happened here, kind of on its own, without anybody, without planning, was this is a coal-fired power plant. They were making steam, which the pharmaceutical plant needed and the oil refinery needed. And then, oh, by the way, byproducts from their plants, others could use, and pretty soon you get this whole incredible network. So even the pollution control, the pollution, the calcium sulfate, the sulfur that's coming out of the stack for the coal plant is used 100% for making gypsum board. That's made out of calcium sulfate. So there's a whole gyprock company that can make gypsum, and there's the sulfur from the oil refinery that's used for liquid fertilizer, and this is just the beginning. And so I know that a lot of people don't like me to talk about coal and things, and they're closing the coal plant, which is, so you can feel comfortable with that. It's, over the years, they want to be more sustainable. They don't want to drain all the water out of this lake because that's their water source. But isn't it amazing that doing all this stuff got them together? It got them to work together. And we say that the reason they work together is because the Rotary Club. Turns out everybody in the town loves the Rotary Club. And the first time I was there back in the 90s, I was invited to go to the Rotary Club, and I thought, oh, this is great, for me. And then I realized everybody would be speaking Danish, and I'm jet lagged. I didn't actually go to the Rotary Club, but I've been there many times, and I've dragged Matthew there and our children there, and this Kallenborg is a big thing in my life. So just because you asked, you didn't ask. I'm going to show you how it all came to be. So these are some of today's buildings. This is the gypsum plant. This is the pharma company. It's Novo Nordisk, a very famous pharma company for making insulin. They make half the world's insulin. These are the pipes that connect the whole town in different ways for hot water, for for gas, for all these different products. And this is the local IKEA. No. This is the coal-fired power plant. Does that look like a coal-fired power plant to you? It's pretty nice. So anyway, I'm one of their favorite guests, and I'm going to show you a little sequence now. So it's not an industrial park per se, it's just that there's a port here, and of course companies locate near a port, so that's no surprise. So this was what it was all looked like in 1961. This will look like in 1973, and in 82, when more and more companies kept joining, and we could make fish farm with the heated water, and we could, and that's what happened. So we now call this an industrial ecosystem. Because the pig farms are great. The Novo Nordisk has a lot of, yeasty substances for pharmaceuticals, and that is very desirable to the pig farms. And they actually have a pipeline for the rest of their organic waste that goes to farmers' fields. And I remember being very, worried when I got there. Gee, how could farmers just put this organic waste? I mean, it's farm plant, so it's pretty clean, right? You can't, it's human impact, right? It's people who swallow those pharmaceuticals. But even so, they actually hired an agronomist to help each farmer, and they didn't charge for it. And here's the business people in the audience. The last time I was there, they were like, "Hey, professor, remember about the material that was going?" All the biomass that was going down to those farmer fields. Well, now they pay us for it because it's been such a good impact on their farmer fields. So if you do your work well and you use good science, you can get these kind of results and make jobs. It's pretty amazing. And I'm just showing you this one. This is what I do. I go all over the world and I study these things. So here's one more example. Oh, benefits. So you see the numbers are quite large. With water savings and chemical inputs, 170,000 tons of gypsum and so forth. And these are all resources that get reused rather than just disposed. So yeah, there you go. Oh, so Marian Chertow, yes, that's me. The people in Denmark named this area industrial symbiosis. And my definition, for better or worse, is the one that's the best known. And look at what I said, it's traditionally separate industries. So you have, an electric plant, a pharma company, and a fish farm, in a collective approach to competitive advantage. And the same old friends, materials, energy, and water for industrial ecology, but also the keys are the collaboration and the human side. And this is why I brought up the Rotary Club, because there is people know each other, they talk to each other. The kids play soccer together, and this can result from that. And we've studied that in many ways. So yeah. Anyhow, so here's one more example. This is in India, completely different from the Danish example. We got permission to study a 45-company industrial park near to Karnataka, the Silicon Valley of India. And we found out that among the 45 companies, facilities, they were generating annually 900,000 tons of discards, shall we call them, right? So my students went in there and they interviewed every single boss of every single company. And here's what we found. We found there was a huge diversity: sugar refinery, coffee beverage, producer. That's actually Nestle's printed circuit boards and granite cutters, so forth, right? And so we asked them for every input and every output and everything that they could give us, and this is what we found. That little did they know, but there was all kinds of sharing going on, you know. And each arrow represents, for example, the food processing facility sending the oil they extract to an oil extraction facility so they can make, you know, food oils out of that, and every, you know, you can just, you see we have a lot of arrows in my field. But very interesting that there was already just so much reason. Well, why? Because it's India, because it's a poor country, because they need the stuff, they need the resources, and they trust each other in this industrial park. And turns out culturally the Indians have always been very conserving and not, you know, didn't want to throw away, even the rich people didn't want to throw away, and everybody throws away now, but we've heard that over and over again. And when we finished the study, this is like the best results I ever got in a study, so I'm going to brag now. We figured out that some people were reusing their products within their facility. There was a sugar plant, and they were taking the sugar cane and burning that for energy for their own plant, but we count that. And then there's 18% were literally doing it across companies. That's what we call the symbiosis. And a little tiny bit was going to informal recycling, you know, people who just collect stuff, and who knows what they do with it. And so only 0.5% was being disposed of that 900,000 tons. So that means that 99.5% of that waste was being reused at least once, and maybe it keeps going around, you know. So that was great for us. We never got such a high number before or since. It says to me that India is already having a circular economy, right? Because there is so much reuse, and I hope that doesn't end. Because as they, you know, as countries get wealthier, they, like us, they get a little bit, you know, more careless about thinking through these things. Anyway, this is the last section of my talk. I thought someone would say, well, what should we do about it? And I thought, well, I'll put up a couple of things that I think are really cool. So this is just a chart that tells you that in the US, 15% of all textiles were recycled in 2015. We don't have later numbers. And that's terrible. That means that 85% is basically, and this is a chart from EPA, US EPA. This is the amount that's landfill. This is the amount that's burned in waste-to-energy plants, the blue part. And only this dark brown part is being recycled. Well, that's terrible. I mean, think about how much clothing weighs. I mean, you put clothing in a bag to take to Goodwill or something. I mean, it's heavy. And it's not that, you know, we could do this thing. We could put it in one of those covered bags and leave it out, even just one bag, and leave it out for the garbage guy. They're doing this in a lot of New England now. Not a lot, but several towns in New England. And then they just take those bags and they go right to Goodwill. You know, I mean, how hard is that? Couldn't we do this? Once something's separated, you can do something with it, and you can do really good things with it. In northern New England, particularly well organized. So anyway, so clothing is one of those things where we should just do it differently, right? We should just figure out how not to throw away 85%. And there's, again, a lot of entrepreneurial activity here. Lots of young people who want to get into this business, and that's great for our economy too. Does anyone remember this campaign? It was from the late 80s and early 90s. It was done by the Environmental Defense Fund and the Advertising Council. And it says, if you're not recycling, you're throwing it all away. And I put this in today because I don't believe in this anymore. And I did. I remember the campaign in 1998 to 1992, and I have friends at, you know, the NGO, Environmental Defense Fund. Fred Krupp is from Yale. He's been the head of it since the beginning. I mean, really great people there. And it was important. And it was an important message back in 1988. But it's not as important a message now because of what we learn in industrial ecology. And let me just go over that. So this is kind of like thinking life cycle again. And you, let's go back to our friend the toaster. You could just have the toaster repaired. That would be nice. Or you could, if you don't want it anymore, you could give it to your nephew who's going off to college and he could use it, right? So that's reuse. You could, another one could be manufactured, more metal could be taken out of the ground, and so forth. So now you know how to look at these charts, because the further out you go, the more labor, material, energy intensive it is to recycle. To repair, it's great. You take your shoes, you get the heels fixed, you get them back. And remanufacturing has become a more important field. This is especially good with like automobile components and electronics and health products, where you can take, the rule is in order to be considered remanufactured, you have to be as good as new. So, so whatever that, carburetor is, it has to be as good as new. So it's a perfectly good thing to do. But you see, then if you're remanufacturing, you don't have to go out and start all over again with the raw materials and the primary producers. This is where all the impact, this is where so many of the impacts are. So if you have to recycle, you've already kind of lost the ballgame, It's not bad, but it's not nearly as good with respect to embedded energy and materials as it is to be farther up this stream, right? So that's a really important lesson, and I hope that every, one of the forestry school kids who wants to start their own company, starts a remanufacturing company, you know what I'm saying? You just have to do it. You just have to do it. Here's an example from Apple. This is their second robot. This is called Daisy, and Daisy can disassemble phones now, iPhones. Now 200 an hour. There's a billion iPhones out there. It's not enough, but it's a start. And they found that when Daisy disassembles them, they can get their raw materials to a much higher, cleaner quality because they're not having to send it off to all different processors and so forth. And these are precious things. I mean, Apple has declared publicly that they're going to make everything they have out of reused products, out of reused materials. So now they'll have their own little pool, right? If there could be another political problem with China or whatever, where we often get a lot of our materials from, here you go. They have their own supply, at least for a little while, because they're taking them off their own phones, right? So you can start to see how all of this starts to mesh together and become very important. So, last example, and I have to disclose that I'm on the board of directors of this company, TerraCycle, and the TerraCycle is famous. Has anyone ever heard of it? Okay, good. It's all about recycling things that are hard to recycle. And really hard, like diapers and cigarettes and chewing gum. I mean, all kinds of crazy things. They recycle. The newest program, and this is a pilot, so I'm not telling you it's going to work, but it uses all the principles that I've just laid out. And that is, it convinced big companies, you can see like Procter & Gamble and, this is can you tell what kind of container that is?
Yes.
Yeah. They asked everybody to make special containers that could be delightfully and happily reused, right? And some of them even functional. I mean, this is Cascade and the cleaning products. The ice cream actually is cold. It's a cold container, and it lasts for 4 hours, so it keeps your ice cream colder longer as it's in transit and so forth. And so all these companies said yes. They said, yeah, we'll do this. We'll get this. And what are they for? Well, go back to that same concept of an online store. All these products are available. You buy the ones you need. Let's say you need 7 different products from 5 different companies. And it comes to you through a UPS in a satchel, with different sections in it. And you use your products, and some you use quickly and some you use slowly. But when you want a refill, you go online and you push the things that you want. And then a few days later, the UPS truck comes back and takes away the ones you used and gives you new ones. And that's why this previous slide talks about, that's not the right direction. Those are the extra slides. That's why they call it the reverse milkman model, because we all remember when, we used to put the milk in and the empties would go out and you get the new milk. And so they've sort of revised this milkman concept, and you see that this is the whole process where the customer uses it and they collect the containers and then they're going to be refilled. And what an interesting pilot, because they're trying to reuse all the containers and not have all the packaging waste that we're so familiar with. So let's hope it works. The company's trying it out in Paris and in New Jersey, very similar. And then some drugstore chains. And it's interesting. It's very interesting to keep on top of it and to see what's going to work. So anyway, that's it. That's all I had. I'd love to have more discussion. And who's going to start? I see lots of people.
This is maybe a naive question, but so these containers that you've used go back and they sterilize them and they refill them?
Pretty much.
They don't necessarily go back to the same person, but they just get refilled.
Right. So regional distribution, yeah, on that. Right, exactly right. Sure.
I was just wondering, so you're basically eliminating or reducing the need for raw material suppliers. Are they lobbying against practices like this?
Yeah, it's an important question. It comes up a lot in the environment, right? Because you want to, there are those vested interests. And the truth is these companies are so large and powerful that, the raw material people aren't going to get in their way, right? And I would say that if there were something really dramatic, but you might even argue that we're going back from cardboard and glass bottles that we used to have, and we're just getting different raw materials. So I haven't seen that study yet. That's why this is piloting new, but it's just the kind of thing that we have the tools to do through industrial ecology. And I'm going to suggest that. I've already suggested to the president of the company that they do a life cycle analysis in a hurry, because what if it's not better than the old way, and one of my students goes out there and makes and embarrasses them in the New York Times, right? And they got the message that they got to do that, but we don't have much granularity on it yet. Yeah. Yes.
We're a cost-based economy and a cost-based society. If you were to pick the most cost-effective 3 things you could do to accomplish this, what would they be?
Well, I have a favorite, I'll just tell you, not among my children, but among my race-girl rules. There is one that we know to be very effective, and most Americans think it's a tax, so it happens in thousands of communities, but doesn't happen in Connecticut except for in one place, called pay as you throw. And when you put out your waste, if you have a lot, you pay a lot more, and if you have a little, you pay less. And recycling is free, so there's an incentive to recycle. And do I have another minute? I don't want to break any of the rules, but I did bring those slides in. We did a matched pair set of similar cities. So we compared New Haven and Worcester. Worcester's had this pay-as-you-throw, you have to pay for a long, long time, and they have half the waste that New Haven has per capita. And you can see why we match those two. They're urban and they have similar housing stock and all that. We also matched Stonington, which has had a program for many years in Connecticut, with Ledyard. Same thing.
How is it collected, the money collected?
It's connected through a bag fee. So you have to put your stuff in a bag or a label. If you want to keep your cans, you can get a label. A lot of the smaller towns just go right to these special bags, and that's how they do it.
Somebody's counting these bags?
They charge you for the bag.
Oh, they charge you for the bag?
Up front.
I got you.
Yeah.
What about bin sizes? Because that's what Seattle does.
Yeah.
You pay, right. So they're different, there's like 4 or 5 different bin sizes for trash.
Yeah.
And then you pay a different fee. If you have a smaller bin, you pay less.
And then you pay in Seattle, you pay disproportionately less, which is great.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Because I've never heard that term.
So what's the term?
Pay as you throw. But then, and then it doesn't matter how much recycling or yard waste you have. That doesn't, those costs
Right.
don't change.
And one of the secrets behind these numbers is that part of it is from recycling, part of it is from not being in the habit of thinking about your waste. But every single one of these programs, Kristen Brown is a friend of mine, and she's done dozens of these studies. And every one, once the town passes it, 20% of the waste goes away. It just disappears. And you go, what's going on? And then you think, well, what do you think? There's illegal dumping.
It's in the park.
That's true. But you need a little enforcement. I mean, it's not that hard. And Seattle's done it, and lots of smaller places have done it. But that's one place it goes. Where else does it go?
More consumption, no? Like food, you would consume it rather than throw it away, or...
Okay.
Compost.
But what? Compost, you can easily do that. You know, we haven't done this study yet either, but it's one I'm very eager to do. Yeah, you have an answer.
People don't realize, but you're paying money in your taxes for the garbage pickup. So you're paying already.
Not everywhere.
Well, a lot of places, yeah.
Yeah. Like in New Haven, it's all through our taxes. We don't pay anything.
But I mean, they're collecting funds.
But you pay your taxes.
Yes, in
Pay
other
your
words, so you're paying already. So to pay for a bag might be cheaper than paying
Yeah.
$10,000 per acre or whatever land tax that you got.
Yeah, but
Property taxes. I mean.
yeah, I don't know, but just going back to where does the stuff go? You know, all of a sudden you realize, you know, I could give this furniture to, you know, to charity, and I could give these clothes to my niece who's pregnant, or you know, it just goes away, and that's the most interesting thing, and why I love this particular thing, because you get waste reduction. We don't want to just have more waste but do it better. We want to have less waste. And this seems to let people know. So the study that I would do if I had some money right now is do the charities. We've heard anecdotally charities get more when these pay-as-you-throw programs are installed. And I think we ought to check that empirically. That would be really cool.
But they're really picky. We've tried to give things to charity, and they sent somebody on and said, no, we can't resell this, we don't want it.
Yeah.
And was it a charity or was it a private company that was doing it?
No, it's a charity.
Okay.
Two or three charities have looked at it and said, no, we don't want that.
So that's getting to be a problem, and I will acknowledge that. Even with clothing, I mean, you mentioned Rwanda. I'm the head of our Rwanda program at my school, and we're seeing that they are getting so many clothes from the West, you know, because Walmart charges so little for socks and underwear, and they're just getting so much clothes that they don't know what to do anymore. So this is like the next level of the problem, right? So it's even worse. Yeah.
So I have a question. I've been thinking about Tide containers, Tide detergent containers.
We could be friends. I think about those things.
And I started to keep a tally now for how many I use each year. And they're really heavy, and you have to recycle them. You can't refill them. It's a really big thing.
So sadly, more in Europe than here, but Procter & Gamble even has a program in the U.S., not just Europe, where they sell you the bottle once, and then they sell you the powder so that you can add water to it, and you can reuse that big container more often. We, the consumers, have to demand that, so you know that's important. But the technology's there and the program is there. So, but that's a great example of where we can make a not such a complicated change.
My sister's an environmentalist in Massachusetts, and she says that there's a digestive machine that is going to be going out of business because it's not working so well. It digests a lot of garbage to a point that it can make it, but you can't use it for farms, or it has to go into a landfill because there's too many toxins in it. Are there new digestive machines now that are trying to separate things out to make it
That's
more
why,
useful?
you use the right word. That's why it's all about separation. You know, we have a plant in Southington now who does the same thing. And I've been there several times. I know the plant manager. It's really good. I mean, they're trying to do food waste. And Yale is actually bringing all its food waste to Southington now, which again, that's questionable from a greenhouse gas position, but you know. at least it's a place to bring it and to follow the law. So we do actually have a law on it in Connecticut. I don't know if Massachusetts does or not. I'd have to look that up because since so many large producers now, restaurants and dormitories and what have to do it, there's sort of a better sorting out of the supply chain there, right? Because the company knows what they're going to get. They know what materials they need to make which reaction. There's a lot of chemistry involved in it, but they're very good at it. So I see that as the future, but along the way, there's a lot of those bad stories that you just told about the plant in Massachusetts. Yes?
So in regards to clothing, used clothing, or even worn clothing, we did some research locally, and Goodwill doesn't like to get things that aren't perfect. But there is a company locally, and I don't know how far afield they are, Planet Aid. They have yellow boxes. You can go online, put your zip code in, and see where their boxes are. They say they take shoes that are so worn you can't wear them anymore, but they reuse through, I guess, fiber separation or something, make rugs and whatnot. So it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time investigating to see where you can take things that other people won't take. But in regards to clothing and shoes and linens, they say,
and that's a great point, and everyone can do that. I mean, but why did the Chinese stop taking our recycling?
Because sorting was too much.
Because it was crap. Because it was contaminated. I mean,
But the town is collecting all fabrics. There are collection sites all over Branford for collecting fabrics.
Okay.
They have to collect them. Take them to the Goodwill or the dump or whatever, there's special places they collect.
No, I wasn't talking about that, but I think that's right. And the more private companies that get involved, sometimes we're suspicious of them, but sometimes they're doing a great job. We have to learn how to sort those out. I know that the Goodwill in Maine, it has like people from LLB that are its managers now, and they rake in like $90 million. We have an incredibly efficient clothing reuse operation. There's other things you can do with clothing, like make rags. There was a huge story in the New York Times about that a couple months ago. You quilt.
I get secondhand clothes.
There you go. Yeah, and some of them are beautiful. This summer we were up in the Berkshires and I saw this woman, the designer, who had made these gorgeous skirts and, yes. Kitty.
My friend's daughter is an epidemiologist, and she's very concerned about what she calls forever chemicals, PFAS, and the contamination into all, I think, from my limited reading about it, goes into fabrics a lot of times, with flame retardants and stuff like that, and then also into things like paper plates with a coating that keeps grease from sinking through, and then once that gets in the stream and you try to recycle or compost that, they claim that it's compostable, but then it contaminates the compost that it becomes part of. And that's very concerning, because if those chemicals are being manufactured into things and unbeknownst to all of us being recycled into these different formats, it's going to be a problem. So I just wondered your thoughts on that, and whether there's like political action that needs to occur to stop having this stuff be used.
Yeah. I mean, just go back in time, ozone, right? Ozone was a savior in our refrigerators, and it allowed us to keep things cold for a long time, and now that, excuse me, I didn't mean ozone.
It's what destroyed us.
Fluorocarbon. Thank you. And I have a theory that everything in the environment starts with, something that used to be good and then gets bad. And so the number of chemicals we haven't even tested is staggering. And hundreds of thousands of chemicals, and that is a problem. Why don't we just study them instead of doing all the other wild things that we do at the international level? I don't know, but you're exactly right. You predicted the path, and they're dangerous things, and you got to detoxify, and that's it.
Yeah, I was just I have so many interesting questions that you've written. One is, what about the concept of bulk fix, for example? You mentioned the tie. what if Stop and Shop had any number of things? You brought back your original container, you set it into an automatic refill thing that knows exactly how much it is, fill it up, you've completely eliminated all that. That's what they used to do in Italy when you bring your little bag.
Yeah.
And
Or your olive oil.
so the whole idea of bulk is interesting. And then the second, one of the second things I thought about was you mentioned that, I think the company that you are part of, an analysis of the transportation involved in bringing things to and from. I often wonder, is Amazon sensible or not sensible in terms of the delivery systems, and how do you analyze that? It's complex.
Well, how you analyze it is the life cycle methods, and they use them. I taught tons of graduate students of mine who are working there. The particular problem that we've identified is called the last mile. So, it might go in a plane from a warehouse in DC to California or something, but how does it get exactly to the customer, right? And that's been the sort of intriguing operations research puzzle. And that's where there's a lot of differences in the world. So in India, they're solving the last mile problem because there's a lot of people who have their own scooters and they don't have jobs necessarily, and they're happy to be hired to drop those packages off into little villages, and that's a culturally interesting thing. From a life cycle perspective, the differences aren't so dramatic. Like if I want to send my mother a sweater for Valentine's Day, whether she goes to, whether I go to the store and pick it up or whether I order it from a catalog and it goes to my mother, you can picture the whole life cycle map in your brain, what you have to calculate and which data sets you need, right? And in the scheme of things, one wonders whether it's the most important problem for an Amazon, which is such a behemoth. They haven't been attentive about recycling that much in the past, but they seem like the one complaint that everybody makes about the cardboard box being 10 times larger or 15 times larger, they seem to be addressing that now. They're using a lot smaller packaging, and so some of it is how long can you get away with it. Some of it is when can we develop the right technologies or even policies, so that you need to do stuff. And that's why I like going to work every day. I mean, all those puzzles are there, and some of them we've done well with, and some of them we've ignored, like testing all the chemicals.
I also was thinking, I think there's a lot of naive, or we just don't have the information. When you take a tuna fish can and you pour the tuna out, then you get the hot water. At least my wife makes me get the hot water and the soap. And then there's a good deal of energy involved in hot water, and that's oil, and that's a fossil fuel, and just sorting that out. So your field is fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure my husband would say I'm just like your wife. Anyway, do we have
maybe one more question?
That's a big one. On your previous slides, when you talk about the materials, the calculation on the materials going in, how far back do you go? Do you include like the manpower of the guy who has to buy a car and then drives to work to make that engine?
Yeah.
Or in the case of the cow, the Monsanto has the seeds that grows the grass, and they cut down the trees to put up the fence to hold the cow. How much does the cow eat over its lifetime? So you have to calculate so far back, where do you cut it off to say, okay, it used this much amount of carbon, or this much amount
So
of...
good for you, that's the right question. And
Yeah.
we have a
go
new,
so far back.
Yeah, we have a new common tool that we use, and we're teaching to our students in about I'm teaching our industrial ecology course this spring, and we have to decide, what are you going to teach them, because you can't teach everything in one semester or one afternoon. There's a new thing I should have brought. I got to incorporate this into my thing, but it's a table. It uses matrix algebra, and I just didn't want anybody to worry about that. Imagine like a graph where I make peanut butter and you make trucks. So there are these charts that every single item every single industry that peanut butter industry interfaces with are on the up and downs. And everyone that the truck interfaces with are
Like a
the
matrix.
horizontal ones, like a matrix.
Yeah.
And they get really big when you look at cars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's called input-output analysis, actually, and there's a special way to, what we call environmentally extended input-output analysis, so that it's set up with not just money, but also environmental variables that we measure. Yeah. Because the technology came from not from dollars, and now it's being used as environmental units. And it's fascinating because, the peanut butter needs the truck, but the truck also sells the peanut butter. I mean, everything's interrelated, everything's connected. And so these matrices help us sort that out, and you have to isolate them geographically and so forth. But our average student now will know how to do that work by the time they graduate, which is really exciting, and be able to be, again, much more accurate and really be able to put your finger on where that problem is.
So, we have an urgent question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One more.
One of the big things, you mentioned they weren't making much progress on biodegradable plastic. But could they make recyclable plastic that you could melt and recast and use
Yes,
again?
they do that. You see Coke bottles that are plastic, that are the big ones, right? And those are easily recyclable because they're all the same plastic, right? They're all polyethylene tetrafluoride, and that's worth a lot of money. And I go to these recycling places, where all your waste is put in a big pile, and they tell me the price of each one, what they're getting for each one today, and that's really valuable right now. So the good plastics, the other good plastic is the hard, like milk carton, the high density polyethylene, and that's also fetching a very good price right now.
How about plastic bags?
Plastic bags are bad. But they don't even take them in the New Haven system, in the New Haven program, and probably most of them, I don't know how many from New Haven, but wherever you live, I bet you they don't even take those. They're called film plastics. And I invite you to do this, it costs money, but I do it anyway. TerraCycle, the company that I work with, and our daughter worked for before I was on the board for 2 years, has these, what they call zero waste boxes. And you can get them online, just like the online store where you can go to Eileen Fisher. They have their own store, and you can get these for anything. You can get these for rubber gloves at the hospital if you're a nurse or a doctor. You can get these for the coffee pods, like that people get when they get a Keurig machine or a Nestle machine. They have, I think, 150 different ones. We get one called the break room box. So imagine the break room at work where people have their coffee and tea packaging and that takes the film plastic. Because that's something you would find in one of these rooms with plastic bags, people bringing in their lunches and so forth. And so ours is multi-purpose, and we've had it in our kitchen for a couple of years. We send it, when you buy it, it has UPS right on it. Federal Express right on it. So you fill it up, and I literally, this is my greatest, every 2 months or so, I bring it to the FedEx on, what street is that? Temple Street. And they just send it. I mean, I don't have to do anything. They put the tape on it, and they just send it off to New Jersey. So you can do it. Well, I can tell you all about that. Lots of people have asked me that, and they have sorters, basically.
What was the question?
What happens to that box? So it's sent to a warehouse near the company headquarters, and they have sorters. They have people, and so it's really important for them that they not get mixed stuff. They want to get just what they asked for in that box. They put huge labels on it, and we found it's been very successful for us.
What's the name of the company?
TerraCycle. T-E-R-R-A and then cycle. And you can also buy their stock online. Yeah.
Thank you so much.